We're live from New Delhi, watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, coming up in the next 30 minutes. Fifth India-US 2+2 Ministerial Dialogue gets underway in New Delhi. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar host US counterparts. US says Israel agrees to 4-hour daily humanitarian pauses in northern Gaza to allow civilians to flee. Prime Minister Netanyahu says Israel does not seek to govern Gaza, asserts fight will continue until Hamas is eradicated. And in cricket, Afghanistan will face South Africa in the ICC World Cup match today at the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad. On to details now. New Delhi hosts the 5th edition of India-US 2+2 Ministerial Dialogue today. The foreign and defense ministers of both countries took part in the meeting. US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in New Delhi to attend the dialogue. During the dialogue, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said India-US bilateral relationship has seen a growing convergence of strategic interest and enhanced defence, security and intelligence cooperation.
The India-US bilateral relationship has seen a growing convergence of strategic interests and enhanced defense, security, and intelligence cooperation. Defense remains one of the most important pillars of our bilateral relationship. Your visit to India is at a time when India and US are closer than ever before. In spite of various emerging geopolitical challenges, we need to keep our focus on the important and long-term issues.
Also, US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said our increasingly strong ties give us all hope for the future of this partnership and for our common efforts towards a more secure world.
The strength of our partnership is rooted in the people-to-people ties that are the heart of our long-standing friendship. Together, our diplomats, entrepreneurs, and students are expanding our partnership in new domains, including clean energy, artificial intelligence, and semiconductors. Our increasingly strong ties give us all hope for the future of this partnership and for our common efforts toward a more secure world.
Well, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jai Shankar said we will undertake a comprehensive overview of cross-cutting strategic defense and security ties, technology and supply chain collaborations and people-to-people exchanges.
In the 2+2, we will undertake, as we have done before, a comprehensive overview of cross-cutting strategic defense and security ties, technology and supply chain collaborations, and people-to-people exchanges. Our trade is today in excess of $200 billion US. FDI is rising in both directions. 270,000 Indian students study in the United States, and we have a diaspora of 4.4 million. A key focus of our discussions today will be the Indo-Pacific region.
And US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said both India and US is harnessing the power of innovation to make their economies more resilient.
We're harnessing together the power of innovation to make our economies more resilient and to make our communities more secure while expanding inclusive economic opportunity. That's evident in the cooperation on semiconductors and advanced biotechnology, on our unprecedented investments in deploying clean energy at scale in our countries as well as across the region, and our joint research and exploration projects in space.
He added, when both the countries study, work and collaborate together, the possibilities of progress are infinite.
We're deepening the remarkable ties between our people, which is really at the heart of everything. Exploring new educational exchanges, even building on what you've already described. Steps to facilitate travel between our countries. Reducing visa wait times. If there's one thing we've learned over the recent decades, it's that when Indians and Americans study together, work together, collaborate together, the possibilities for progress are infinite.
Earlier, U.S. State Secretary Blinken met India's Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. The two leaders shook hands and greeted each other before heading for the 2+2 Ministerial Dialogue. The leaders held an open and productive conversation on further developing strategic partnership. And they also spoke about West Asia, Indo-Pacific and other regional issues. Blinken described the India-US partnership between the two countries as the strongest ever.
It's always wonderful to be in India. We're building on a rather remarkable year of engagement, and I think it's just evidence of the fact that we have not only the strongest bilateral partnership we've ever had, but also a regional one and indeed a global one. And that was further evidenced by India's leadership of the G20 this year. And as Jai said, we have a lot to do, including with our defense colleagues, so I'm very much looking forward to that. And I think it's further evidence of our resolute focus from the United States on the Indo-Pacific, our region for the future. And the future is actually now, and we're building it now, and we're building it together with India.
And for more on this, we have with us our correspondent, Jessica Taneja. Well, Jessica, Blinken has said that the possibilities of progress are infinite. Also, the Indo-Pacific has emerged as a pillar of India and U.S. defense and security cooperation, as we all know. They're also members of the Quad. What are the key drivers of the Indo-U.S. partnership in the Indo-Pacific, as Jaishankar also mentioned about the key focus on the area?
Well, certainly Indo-Pacific has driven another strategy altogether by U.S. and we've seen the heightened activity there and collaborations and various defense deals that have been signed, keeping in mind the possibility of heightened activity by, in fact, also to an extent to limit the extent of China in the region, but the cooperation goes beyond just China. So of course the Indo-Pacific includes a lot of initiatives that we've seen in the recent past when it comes to maritime security as well. Both the regions have spoken at length, and of course information exchange, technology, and also a lot of other initiatives that we're going to continue to see with the inception of this 2+2 dialogue. Back in 2016, we had in fact agreed on the COMCASA, which would enable crucial information exchange between the two countries, especially related to defense. So of course we know that Indo-Pacific as a strategy is one of the main drivers for this relationship, but there's a lot more than just containing China in the region.
Right, Jessica. Also, Blinken has also mentioned about enhancing maritime domain awareness. Can you tell us more about that?
That's right, and we will know more about what kind of initiatives and what further cooperation is required in that regard after the statement is put out in about an hour or so is what we're expecting. What we do know is that the heightened activity in the Indo-Pacific indicates that more deeper cooperation between the two nations is likely to take place. We've seen the signing of the ICET, the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum as well before that. So of course a lot of different pacts which initiate and promote the kind of people-to-people ties as well. And when it comes to maritime security, we've seen information exchange, and within the COMCASA there will be a lot more dialogue and a lot more collaboration in the future.
Right, Jessica, as you mentioned, people-to-people ties is very important. Jaishankar also highlighted the rise in trade between the two nations. Lakhs of Indian students study in the U.S. How has this come up in the talks?
Well, bilateral trade is something interesting to watch for when it comes to America, because if you see the current trade between the two nations is somewhere around $128 billion. And if you go by the recent surveys, it is suggested that the trade between the two nations could reach $300 billion by 2026 and 27. And that would be a huge jump from where we are at the moment. In fact, the defense trade between the two nations was nearly zero 2 decades ago, with in fact India being sanctioned by America in 1998, and from that we've come to now $20 billion of defense trade between the two nations. And of course India becoming a major defense partner. The focus also for this 2+2 dialogue is security cooperation. So all the defense initiatives that have been undertaken, the progress for that will be reviewed. So a lot more can be expected while we'll also talk about bilateral trade and what more can be put into focus when it comes to security.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for that update. We'll keep coming back to you for more. And moving on to updates from the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. The White House on Thursday said that Israel has agreed to put in place 4-hour daily humanitarian pauses in its counter-terrorism operations in northern Gaza. The decision came after President Joe Biden pressed Israelis for a multi-day stoppage in the fighting in a bid to negotiate the release of hostages held by Hamas.
There will be 2 humanitarian corridors allowing people to flee the areas of hostilities in the northern part of Gaza. The first such corridor, open between 4 and 5 hours every day for the past few days, has already enabled many thousands of people to reach safer areas. The second route along the coastal road will enable many more thousands to reach safer areas in the south. And of course, we are continuing to work closely with our Israeli partners to address and remain vigilant about efforts from Hamas to discourage and prevent civilians from fleeing this area.
While U.S. President Joe Biden took to his social media account and said that humanitarian pauses in Gaza aim to get up to 158 trucks daily to increase the flow of food, water and medicine into the region. In a series of posts on X, formerly Twitter, Biden said the U.S. is focused on increasing humanitarian supplies and assistance. He further said that Israel makes its own decisions and that they must distinguish between terrorists and civilians. And the United Nations has said that any halt to fighting between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip would need to be coordinated with the United Nations.
Well, we've just seen the press reports not long ago. I mean, how any such halt in the fighting and how it would work for humanitarian purposes would need to be coordinated with the United Nations, especially on the issue of timings and location. And obviously, in order for this to be done safely for humanitarian purposes, it would have to be agreed with all parties to the conflict to be truly effective.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Thursday that his country does not seek to govern Gaza after its war against Hamas, even as the army will continue its offensive until Hamas is eradicated. In an interview with Fox News, Netanyahu said that a civilian government would need to take shape in Gaza, but Israel would make sure an attack like October 7th does not happen again. Meanwhile, Israel has described videos released by Hamas on Thursday of 2 hostages held in Gaza as a sign of life, but called them part of their captors' campaign of psychological warfare.
אות חיים של חנה ויגיל היקרים מתוך רצועת עזה. אנחנו מחבקים אותם ואת המשפחות שלהם ואומרים להם ולכל המשפחות של החטופים, והחטופים הם שומעים אותי. אנחנו לא החמצנו אף הזדמנות, ואנחנו לא נחמיץ אף הזדמנות באשר היא להשבת חטופים. צה"ל פועל יחד עם יתר הארגונים הביטחוניים מסביב לשעון במאמץ עליון, מודיעיני, מבצעי, אזרחי, כל...
And the Lebanese Islamist group Hezbollah fired missiles over the Israeli border. Israel's military responded with artillery fire. The IDF also struck terrorist targets using artillery. Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israeli forces across the border after the recent conflict started on 7th of October. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. Leaders of the US and China gear up for a probable meeting, their first face-to-face interaction in 12 months. The 6th edition of the Paris Peace Forum to kickstart a focus on peace-building efforts and support for fragile countries. And we tell you how markets are flooded with the earthen lamps and decorations promoting local products this Diwali.
Welcome to Jaipur.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, and moving on, there's growing speculation the leaders of the United States and China are gearing up for a meeting, their first face-to-face interaction in 12 months. Although there's no confirmation of a get-together, lawmakers on Capitol Hill have drawn up a list of issues they want Joe Biden to bring up with Xi Jinping. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Well, all signs seem to suggest that this meeting will take place between President Biden and President Xi, and yet there is still no confirmation, neither from Washington nor Beijing, that the two leaders will actually get together in the same room. And yet it hasn't stopped US cable news networks here in the United States having various different panel discussions to look at what could be on the agenda. We've had think tanks here in Washington holding symposiums to look at a potential list of topics that the two men will want to take on. So, no confirmation yet, but we have seen Republicans in the House of Representatives push President Biden to challenge President Xi on a number of issues they feel should be raised. They also argue that by doing so, it would show that the US is serious about strengthening the relationship and taking it forward. In amongst that list of demands, there is stopping the flow of chemicals from China, chemicals that are used in the production of fentanyl that then leads to drug overdoses here in the US. They also want President Biden to bring up the topic of the pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai, the Hong Kong pro-democracy campaigner who is still being held, and they want him to challenge President Xi on the escalation of confrontations in the South China Sea that we've seen in recent weeks. There's been plenty of diplomacy in recent weeks between the two countries, including Wang Yi, the foreign minister, coming here to Washington, D.C. We've got the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen meeting with the Chinese Vice Premier, and yet still that confirmation that the two presidents are going to be meeting is yet to come. We could see that in the coming days. Some suggestion that potentially Xi Jinping could come here to Washington for a meeting at the White House, or simply that the two men might have a brief chat on the sidelines of the APEC summit in San Francisco. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD.
And as Asian leaders prepare to arrive in San Francisco for next week's APEC summit, one of the questions is whether there will be new announcements on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Launched last year and including non-APEC members, India and Fiji, the framework is seen as an attempt to counter Chinese influence. Ira Spitzer reports from San Francisco.
Negotiators are reportedly working furiously behind the scenes to try and be able to show some meaningful progress when leaders from Asia and the Americas gather next week in San Francisco for the APEC summit. The Biden administration launched the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, known as IPEF, last year, and it's widely seen as an attempt to counter Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific. IPEF has four so-called pillars: trade, supply chain resilience, infrastructure and clean energy, and tax and anti-corruption measures. It has 14 founding members, including India, although India doesn't participate in the trade portion. While the agreement on supply chain resilience was completed in May, the other pieces have been more difficult. According to reports, agreeing on labor and environmental standards has been tricky, and earlier this week, the U.S. suspended talks on some digital trade regulations out of concern that those would limit the country's ability to enact still tougher technology regulations here. Despite India not being an APEC member, Indian officials will be in San Francisco for the IPEF meeting, taking place concurrently with the APEC event. Ira Spitzer reporting in San Francisco for DD India.
Well, the 6th annual Paris Peace Forum will begin on Friday. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, Prime Minister of Georgia, Irakli Garibashvili, Chairman of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Zelsko Kosmisk, and President of Montenegro, Jakov, arrived at LSE Palace on Thursday. French President Emmanuel Macron welcomed the leaders and held bilateral talks with several state leaders. The 6th edition of the Peace Forum will focus on peace-building efforts and support for fragile countries in a context of multi-crisis. It will also focus on the responsibility of major powers and emerging powers in peace-building. And in the ongoing conflict, both Russia and Ukraine claim to have attacked each other on Thursday. Russian Defense Ministry reported that their forces thwarted attacks by the Ukrainian army from multiple directions, while the Ukrainian side said that it launched attacks on Russian command posts and signals intelligence facilities. Meanwhile, Ukrainian police officers went door-to-door in Ukraine's Kupiansk satellite town of Vazlovai, trying to convince parents that they should escape the increasing Russian shelling of the area. The Ukrainian government has ordered the evacuation of children from part of Kupiansk and surrounding areas under intense Russian shelling. Kupiansk remains one of the most active parts of the eastern front line, with Russian troops attempting to encircle and recapture the town. Some 270 children remained in town after the evacuation was ordered on the 3rd of November. Moving on, Portugal's President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa has dissolved the parliament and called for snap elections. The announcement came after Socialist Prime Minister Antonio Costa offered his resignation following the arrest of his chief of staff as part of an anti-corruption investigation that includes allegations of malfeasance and influence peddling. Speaking after meeting his consultative body, the Council of State, Rebelo said the government will remain in function for now, but the election was needed to provide clarity and direction to overcome an unexpected void that surprised and disturbed the Portuguese.
I have been called to decide on the scenario created by the government, the consequence of the Prime Minister's resignation. I have decided for the dissolution of Parliament and called elections to March 10, 2024.
Well, the first international convention on millets was inaugurated in the Indian state of Odisha, focusing on people-centric millet missions, livelihoods and nutrition for tribal communities, preparing a global roadmap. The United Nations has declared 2023 as the International Year of Millets, with Odisha being the first state to organize such convention. The government launched the Millets Mission in 2017 to revive millets, increasing direct benefits and investing over $303 million for livelihood support. Sundargarh and Odisha are recognized as millet champions, with ICAR supporting growth and Odisha's Development Commissioner encouraging farmers to accept farming. And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. Festival of Diwali begins today with the celebrations of Dhanteras. On this day, as per tradition, people invest and buy gold and silver in the form of jewelry and utensils. While Dhan means wealth, Teras means the 13th day of the moon cycle. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has wished countrymen on the occasion. The contingents of India and Kazakhstan jointly practice the conduct of counter-terrorism operations in a sub-conventional environment, sharing tactical drills and promoting best practices at Uttar. Indo-Tibetan Border Police (ITBP) is responsible for guarding the 3,488 kilometers of India-China border. The altitude of ITBP border outpost ranges from 9,000 feet to 18,750 feet, where the temperature dips to -45 degrees Celsius. Indian Home Minister Amit Shah paid tribute to the Martyrs Memorial in ITBP campus in Dehradun on Friday. Several parts of the Indian capital, New Delhi, received rainfall in the wee hours today, bringing a much-needed respite from the increased air pollution in the national capital. Air quality index has slightly improved after the rainfall in the city is still in the very poor category. With continuous stubble burning, the city of Bathinda in India's Punjab continues to remain enveloped in smoke. The air quality index in Bathinda remained in the very poor category for the past 2 weeks, with Central Pollution Control Board measuring it above 350 for majority of the time. And markets are flooded with earthen lamps and decorations, prompting local products this Diwali. People are opting for local products, lending a local flavor to the festivities and giving a new boost to the economy as well. DD India's Abhishek Mahajan reports.
Crowded streets, people throng shops to buy lamps, candles, decorative lights. Time to deck up your home. It's Diwali time, India's biggest festival, the Festival of Light. For Prakash Chandra, his spot on the streets, Bhagirath Palace, a local market near iconic Lal Killa, is sacred. Despite comparatively cheaper wholesale price of Chinese products, he chooses to sell Indian-made products on Diwali.
People are going for locally made products more than the Chinese ones. They ask for Indian-made products because quality-wise they are better, and people now are more vocal towards local products.
Not only him, majority of the vendors choose the same path.
People are specifically asking for Indian products, which are made in the country. All these are handmade and locally made.
Awareness for locally made products is real. People in the national capital are opting for handmade, made in India products.
I have always been fond of Indian-made products, and because of us, these people will also be able to celebrate Diwali. I urge people to buy Indian products.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in the latest episode of Mann Ki Baat, once again pushed for local products amid the festive season. He also posted a video on X and shared a link on which people can post selfies with such products or their makers on the Namo application.
I will buy the Indian products and post the selfie on that Namo app. I will take that initiative definitely.
हमारे त्योहारों में हमारी प्राथमिकता हो वोकल फॉर लोकल और हम मिलकर उस सपने को पूरा करें। हमारा सपना है आत्मनिर्भर भारत।
One small step taken by all of us can bring along a big difference. This Diwali, spread light of happiness and be the reason of someone's smile. With cameraman Sharda, this is Abhishek Mahajan in Delhi for DD India.
Well, that's all for this edition of DD India Live. Well, let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook X, formerly known as Twitter and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.